Okay, here is a video going through the phonation types that we see in the world's languages. We're going to look at 5 phonation types. These are sometimes also called states of the glottis because, well, it'll become fairly obvious. It's all based on what's happening at the glottis. So we have voicelessness. We're already familiar with that from English. Sounds like p, t, s, sh, h, right? These voiceless obstruents. Whisper. So when you're whispering like this, a lot of the sounds are produced with a whisper phonation. Um, Breathy voice, and that's like this. So some people speak breathy a lot of the time, deliberately or because of uh, some anatomical pathology that they have. Um, and there are languages that use breathy voice contrastively. So breathy versus a modal vowel, breathy versus a modal consonant. Modal voice, what we often normally just abbreviate to voiced, but we call it modal voice when we want to distinguish between breathy voice and, well, the next thing that we're coming across. Modal voice, we know how to transcribe that. It generally has its own symbols. Um, and creaky voice, which has a lot of other names that it goes by in the technical literature as well as everyday speech. Laryngalization, glottalization, creak, uh, vocal fry as a popular non-linguistic term for it. Okay, and creaky voice can sound like this. But again, like breathy voice, it can also be used on individual sounds contrastively. So you can distinguish modal from creaky sounds in a language. So I'm not going to go into much depth about voiceless and modal phonations because we're already familiar with them. In whisper, the vocal folds are closer together than they are for voiceless sounds, but they're not vibrating. They're just close enough so that the air flowing past them gets turbulent and creates this noisiness, and that's the sort of hissiness, the hissy quality. Even that hissy quality is because of that turbulence. Now, the textbook mentions an IPA diacritic, a dot that you put under a symbol for whisper. This isn't actually the use of that dot. In fact, no language uses whisper contrastively. So the IPA, the main IPA, does not have a way to represent whispered sounds. Remember that the IPA isn't about everything we can do with our vocal tract. It's about the things that are important linguistically. If there's something that's used contrastively in any language in the world, then it should have some way of representing that distinction in the IPA. Whisper isn't used that way, so it doesn't. But there is a supplement used to describe certain systematic errors in pronunciation by speech therapists, speech pathologists. And that supplement has the underdot for what's called whispery voice, which is not what we're talking about here. It's a pathological condition that we're not going to get into here. It's not this, and it's as someone who's researched whisper, I'm keen to make that distinction. It is important, it is a principle of the IPA that we only encode things that are linguistically relevant, and whisper just isn't, not in that contrastive sense. Um, so I'm going to show you here's some IPA representation. So voicelessness, often we just have a symbol for the voiceless sound. Sometimes we don't. So for a voiceless nasal or other sonorant, for a voiceless vowel, we use a ring underneath the symbol, an open ring under the symbol to indicate this is pronounced voicelessly. And that happens contrastively in some languages and allophonically in more. Whisper is not contrastive, so there is no IPA representation. It is not what the textbook represents. Breathy voice, so, for example, something like that. You use a double underdot to indicate breathiness. For modal voice, again, like voicelessness, mostly we just use the symbol for that sound. But you can actually say, I'm talking about a K, but it is voiced here. Now the question may arise, why would I want to do that? And I'll just use a G. Every symbol that we have a voiceless symbol for, we also have a voiced symbol for, except for the glottal stop. You can imagine what the reason is for that, but for all the others, we have a voiced partner. Why would we want a diacritic to say, yeah, but it's voiced? Um, think about that. Maybe add a discussion on the website to see if you come up with a reason why that might be. It's an interesting question, isn't it? Um, all right, go back to this modal voice. Then the last one is creaky voice. Creaky voice is represented in the IPA with a tilde underneath the character. You'll notice that all of these, even the not technically IPA, but the supplemental thing on whispery voice, all of these things that represent laryngeal states or phonation types are diacritics that go underneath the main character. And I kind of like this because the main character represents what's happening supralaryngally, and then the phonation type is what's happening laryngally. It's the lowest, anatomically, the lowest thing that can happen in the sound. So diacritically, it happens at the bottom of the symbol. It's kind of a nice little iconicity in our otherwise sometimes a little bit arbitrary uh, phonetic alphabet here. Okay, so that's our five phonation types. We have voicelessness, whisper, breathy voice, modal voice, or just voicing, and creaky voice. Uh, Lots of fun, lots more to be said, but that's enough for now, isn't it?